The officer steps into his path. Where do you think you're going? The hallway smells like old paper and polish. Shoes echo. Voices drop low. The black man stops. I'm here for a hearing, he says. The officer looks him up and down. Slow. Careful. Like weighing trash. Yeah, the officer says. And? The man shifts his briefcase. His hand is steady. His chest is not. I was told to check in at courtroom B. The officer laughs once. Sharp. Courtroom B. He leans closer. You don't look like courtroom B. A woman nearby pretends to read her phone. A clerk freezes mid-step. The man feels heat in his face. He keeps his voice calm. I just need directions. The officer's smile fades. Listen, he says quietly. This building is for important people. You wait where I tell you. The word lands hard. Unimportant. The man swallows. I'm not causing trouble. The officer steps closer. Too close. You already are. The officer's hand rests near his belt. Not touching it. Almost. Stand over there, the officer says. And don't move. The man looks at the courtroom doors. They are still closed. Inside his briefcase, folded neat and clean, is a black robe. The doors begin to open. The courthouse doors open at exactly 8:12 a.m. He notices because he always notices time. Too early and people stare. Too late and they judge. He chose early. The black man steps inside. His shoes echo once. Then again. The building feels cold. Not from air. From memory. A security guard nods. Another doesn't. Bag, one says. He hands over the briefcase. The guard opens it. Papers. A notebook. Nothing else visible. The guard pauses. What's this for? The guard asks. Work, the man says. The guard shrugs and waves him through. It should end there. It doesn't. Hey! The voice comes from the right. Firm. Sharp. He turns. A police officer stands near the hallway entrance. Arms crossed. Watching. Yes, the man says. The officer tilts his head. Where you headed? Courtroom B. The officer steps closer. For what? The man feels eyes on him now. He answers anyway. A hearing. The officer looks at his shoes. Then his coat. Then his face. You got paperwork? Yes. Let me see it. The man reaches into his briefcase slowly. He hands over the notice. The officer barely glances. Sit over there. The officer points to a bench near the wall. I was told to check in first, the man says. The officer's jaw tightens. I said sit. A pause. The man feels his heart beat once. Loud. He sits. Minutes pass. People walk by. Some glance. Most don't. The officer talks to another guard. They laugh. The man can't hear the joke. He hears the tone. He checks the time. 8:21. He stands. The officer turns instantly. Did I tell you to get up? I just want to make sure I'm in the right place, the man says. The officer steps into his space. You don't move unless I say. The words are quiet. Controlled. The man feels heat in his neck. I'm not trying to cause trouble. The officer smiles. Not kind. Funny. That's what trouble always says. A woman nearby looks up. Then looks away. The man swallows. Can I speak to a clerk? The officer's smile disappears. You can wait. The word lands heavy. Unspoken things hang behind it. You can wait. You always wait. You people wait. The man nods once. Okay. He sits again. Inside, something twists. He thinks of his father. Of patience. Of cost. 8:27. A clerk steps out. Courtroom B will begin shortly. The man stands. The officer blocks him. Not you. I'm scheduled for. The officer cuts him off. I said not you. The clerk hesitates. Is there an issue? She asks. The officer doesn't look at her. He's confused. The clerk looks at the man. Her eyes apologize. Quietly. I'll check, she says. She leaves. The man exhales slowly. Why are you doing this? He asks. The officer leans in. Because you walked in here like you belonged. The words sting more than shouting would. I do belong, the man says. The officer laughs. That's what you think. A few people are watching now. No one speaks. The officer steps back and gestures to the bench. Sit. Or I make this harder. The man looks at the courtroom doors. They are still closed. He sits. 8:30. The loudspeaker clicks. All parties for courtroom B. The officer steps forward. Hold! The speaker stops. The man looks up. The officer looks down at him. Don't test me. The man feels it then. Clear. Sharp. Fear. Not of pain. Of power. He stands anyway. I need to go in now. The officer's hand lifts. Stops inches from his chest. You don't go anywhere. Silence crashes around them. The officer's eyes are narrow now. Challenged. You think you're important? The officer says. The man meets his gaze. Yes. The officer's face hardens. Then prove it. The courtroom doors begin to open, and the officer tightens his stance. The courtroom doors open halfway. Light spills into the hallway. The officer steps wider, blocking the path. Not your place, he says. The man feels it in his chest. A dull pressure. Familiar. Old. I'm scheduled, the man says again. His voice stays calm. It takes effort. The officer doesn't raise his voice. That's the point. Everyone's scheduled for something, he replies. Doesn't mean it's here. The bailiff appears at the door. Tall. Neutral face. All parties for courtroom B, please enter. The man moves. The officer shifts with him, shoulder to shoulder. This isn't over, the officer murmurs. Sit back down. The bailiff pauses. Looks between them. Is there a problem? The bailiff asks. The officer exhales like he's tired. This man's confused, he says. He doesn't belong in this hearing. The word belong hits harder than unimportant. The man feels his jaw tighten. I was assigned. The officer cuts him off. Sir, he says louder now, turning slightly so others can hear. I need you to stop causing a scene. A woman in line frowns. I'm not causing a scene, the man says. The officer tilts his head. See. Defensive. The bailiff hesitates. Sir, the bailiff says to the man, may I see your paperwork? The officer steps in. I already checked it. The bailiff looks at the officer. And? The officer shrugs. Didn't look right. Didn't look right. The man feels something cold settle behind his ribs. What didn't look right? He asks. The officer smiles thinly. Everything. A beat. The bailiff shifts his weight. Sir, he says to the officer, quieter now. Court is about to begin. The officer nods without looking at him. Exactly. We don't need disruptions. The man feels eyes on his back. On his hands. On his face. He thinks of the robe folded in his briefcase. He thinks of timing. Not yet. Can I speak to the clerk again? He asks. The officer laughs. You really don't know when to stop. The officer steps closer. Too close. Listen carefully, he says. This building runs on order. On respect. The officer looks him up and down. You don't get to walk in here and demand things. I'm not demanding, the man says. Yes, you are, the officer snaps. You're demanding to be treated like you matter. Silence. The words sit there. A man near the wall clears his throat. Says nothing. The bailiff glances toward the courtroom. Then back. Officer, the bailiff says. If he has paperwork. The officer cuts him off. I said I handled it. The bailiff stops talking. The man notices that. The way authority folds inward. He feels anger rise. He pushes it down. I'm asking one last time, the man says. Please let me pass. The officer's face tightens. You don't give orders here. I'm not giving orders. You're challenging me. The officer's voice lowers. And that's a mistake. The officer gestures toward the bench again. Sit. Now. The man doesn't move. The officer's hand hovers near his radio. This is your warning. The word warning carries weight. Threat without shape. A young woman whispers to her partner. That's not right. Her partner squeezes her hand. Says nothing. The bailiff steps back inside the courtroom. The doors begin to close. The man feels it then. Real loss. Not pride. Not ego. If he waits, justice waits. If he waits, silence wins. Officer, he says, steady but firm. You are preventing me from entering my assigned courtroom. The officer's eyes flash. There it is, he says. Attitude. The officer steps back and raises his voice. Supervisor. Footsteps echo. A sergeant appears from the far end. Older. Calm face. What's going on? The sergeant asks. The officer points. This individual is refusing to follow instructions. The man looks at the sergeant. I'm scheduled for courtroom B, he says. I've been blocked from entering. The sergeant looks at him. Long measured. Then at the officer. Did you check his paperwork? The sergeant asks. Yes, the officer says quickly. And? The officer shrugs again. Didn't add up. The sergeant nods slowly. Sir, he says to the man, why don't you wait while we sort this out? The man feels the familiar slide. Order over truth. Comfort over justice. How long? He asks. The sergeant doesn't answer. The courtroom doors close fully. A muffled voice inside calls the docket. The hearing has started. The man looks at the closed doors. Then at the officer. The officer's mouth curves into a small, satisfied smile. See, he says quietly. You can wait. The man grips his briefcase. Inside, the robe stays folded. For now. The hallway feels smaller now. Not because of walls. Because of eyes. People know something is wrong. They don't know what to do with it. The man stands near the bench. He doesn't sit. Sitting feels like agreement. The officer leans against the wall, relaxed. Like he's already won. Inside the courtroom, voices rise and fall. Names are called. Time moves on without him. The man exhales slowly. A middle-aged woman with a file folder watches him from across the hall. Her mouth tightens. She looks at the officer. Then back at him. She says nothing. The sergeant speaks quietly to the officer. Just keep him calm, the sergeant says. The officer nods. Smiles. I've got it. The sergeant walks away. The man watches that too. How authority hands off responsibility. The officer steps closer again. You see what happens when you don't listen, he says. I listened, the man replies. You just didn't hear me. The officer laughs. Cute. A young clerk rushes past, whispering into a headset. She glances at the man. Her eyes linger. She slows. Sir, she says softly. Are you okay? The officer turns sharply. He's fine. The clerk hesitates. I asked him. The officer steps between them. You don't need to be involved. The clerk's cheeks flush. She backs away. The man feels a flicker of gratitude. And guilt. Even kindness comes with risk. Why are you doing this? He asks the officer again. The officer's smile fades. You really don't get it, he says. This is how order works. Order for who? The man asks. The officer's eyes harden. Watch your tone. The man nods once. People are watching, he says quietly. The officer looks around. Notices the stares. The whispers. His jaw tightens. Good, he says. Let them watch you learn. A man near the water fountain clears his throat. That's enough, the man says suddenly. Everyone freezes. The officer turns. Excuse me, he snaps. The bystander steps forward slightly. Hands raised. I've been standing here, the man says. He hasn't done anything wrong. The officer laughs. Loud. Sharp. And who are you? Just someone with eyes. The officer steps closer to the bystander. Then keep them to yourself. The bystander hesitates. Steps back. Silence rushes in again. The man feels it twist inside him. How fast support fades. The officer turns back to him. See, he says. Nobody's here for you. The man's voice stays even. I'm here for myself. That lands. The officer's nostrils flare. You're making this worse. The man says nothing. A woman with a notepad and phone steps forward. She wears a press badge. Slightly bent. Officer, she says. I'm with local media. Can I ask? The officer snaps his head toward her. No. She blinks. I'm just documenting. No recording, the officer says. This is a secure area. She lowers her phone slowly. I'm not recording, she says. I'm observing. The officer steps closer. Then observe from outside. The journalist hesitates. Looks at the man. You okay? She asks him. Yes, he says. The officer turns back to her. Move. She moves. But not far. The man feels the air change. Attention sharpens behavior. But it also sharpens cruelty. The officer straightens his vest. Raises his voice slightly. Sir, he says, loud enough for others to hear. If you continue to resist instructions, I will escort you out. Escort me where? The man asks. Out of the building. The man feels a pulse of anger. He steadies himself. I'm not resisting, he says. I'm waiting to be allowed into my courtroom. The officer scoffs. You missed your chance. I didn't. You did, the officer says. Because you wouldn't sit down. The man shakes his head once. That's not true. The officer steps closer again. Too close. Careful, the officer says. You're raising your voice. I'm not. You are, the officer insists. And you're making people uncomfortable. The man looks around. People look away. He understands then. Comfort is selective. The bailiff steps out of the courtroom again. Officer, the bailiff says quietly. The judge is asking why the docket is delayed. The officer stiffens. I'm handling a situation. The bailiff looks at the man. Recognition flickers. Confusion. Sir, the bailiff says, were you scheduled? The officer cuts him off sharply. I said I'm handling it. The bailiff stops. The man feels something shift. The moment tightening. Like a rope. The officer turns to him. This is your last chance, he says. Sit down. Or leave. The man looks at the courtroom doors. They are closed again. Inside, justice is happening without him. He reaches for his briefcase. The officer's hand snaps up. Don't. The man freezes. The hallway goes silent. What's in the bag? The officer demands. The man meets his eyes. Proof, he says. The officer's face hardens. Of what? The man doesn't answer. The journalist lifts her phone slightly. The officer notices. Put it down, he snaps. The journalist hesitates. I'm allowed. Put it down, the officer repeats. She lowers it. The man opens his briefcase just an inch. Black fabric shows. Just enough. The bailiff's eyes widen. The officer steps back half a step. What is that? The officer asks. The man closes the briefcase. Time, he says. Footsteps echo from inside the courtroom. The judge is standing. And the officer doesn't know it yet. The officer recovers fast. Too fast. What did you just show me? He asks. The man doesn't answer. The officer steps forward again, reclaiming space. Reclaiming control. I asked you a question. The man keeps his hands visible. Calm. Still. You told me not to open the bag, he says. I listened. The officer's jaw tightens. Smart mouth, he mutters. The bailiff shifts uneasily near the door. His eyes keep returning to the briefcase. To the man's face. Like a puzzle almost solved. Officer, the bailiff says quietly. The court is waiting. The officer snaps his head around. Then they can wait. The words are sharp. Wrong. A few people gasp. Just a little. The journalist looks up again. Her fingers twitch near her phone. The man notices everything. The officer turns back to him. You think flashing something makes you special? The officer says. You think that scares me? The man speaks slowly. I think you should let me pass. The officer laughs. No, he says. I think I should check that bag. That's not necessary, the man replies. The officer's eyes narrow. Are you refusing a lawful request? The word lawful hangs in the air. The man feels it tighten around his throat. I haven't been given a reason, he says. The officer steps closer. Inches now. I'm giving you one, he says. You're acting suspicious. Because I asked to enter a courtroom? Because you're not following instructions. The man shakes his head once. I followed every instruction, he says. Until you blocked me. The officer's voice hardens. Last warning. The officer reaches for the briefcase. The man pulls it back instinctively. That's all it takes. There it is, the officer snaps. Resistance. No, the man says quickly. Don't. The officer grabs his arm. The hallway freezes. Gasps. A sharp intake of breath. Officer, the bailiff says loudly, that's enough. The officer ignores him. You don't pull away from me, the officer says. The man feels pain bloom in his wrist. Controlled. Calculated. I'm not resisting, he says. His voice shakes now. Just a little. The officer twists his grip. You are now. The journalist raises her phone fully. I'm recording, she says. Put it down, the officer shouts. People step back. Fear spreads fast. The man feels it all crash together. The weight. The history. The moment. Officer, he says louder now. You are crossing a line. The officer sneers. You don't get to decide that. The sergeant returns, moving quickly. What's going on? The sergeant demands. This man tried to pull away, the officer says. I'm securing him. The sergeant looks at the man's wrist. The grip. The face is watching. Let go, the sergeant says. The officer hesitates. I said let go, the sergeant repeats. The officer releases him slowly. The man exhales. His hand trembles. He closes it into a fist. The sergeant turns to him. Sir, he says, measured. Why didn't you just comply? The question hits harder than the grab. I did comply, the man says. Until I was blocked. The sergeant sighs. This didn't need to escalate. No, the man agrees. It didn't. The officer scoffs. He's playing games. The man looks at the sergeant. I am the assigned party for courtroom B, he says. You can verify that. The sergeant hesitates. Show me your paperwork. The man reaches for the briefcase again. Slowly, carefully. The officer tenses. The man opens it fully this time. The robe is visible now. Folded. Black. Heavy. Silence slams into the hallway. The sergeant stares. The bailiff's mouth opens slightly. The journalist forgets to blink. The officer frowns. What is that? He asks again. But this time there's doubt. The man doesn't answer yet. The sergeant clears his throat. Sir, he says, why do you have a judge's robe? The officer laughs nervously. Probably a costume, he says. Trying to make a point. The man looks at the officer. I am making a point, he says. Just not the one you think. Footsteps echo from inside the courtroom. Slow. Deliberate. The doors open. Everyone turns. The bailiff steps out and speaks loudly, his voice carrying. All rise. The hallway stiffens. People stand without thinking. The officer doesn't move at first. The man straightens his coat. The bailiff looks directly at him now. Your Honor, the bailiff says, uncertain but respectful, we're ready. The officer's face drains of color. Wait, the officer says. What? The man lifts the robe from the briefcase. The fabric unfolds in his hands. Heavy. Certain. The officer takes a step back. The man looks at him one last time before putting it on. This, he says quietly, is the line you crossed. And the courtroom watches. The hallway doesn't breathe. It holds its breath. The man slides one arm into the robe, then the other. The fabric settles on his shoulders like it always does. Familiar. Grounding. The officer stares. No, he says. Just one word. Small. The bailiff straightens fully now. His voice firms. All rise for the Honorable Judge Marcus Hale. The name lands hard. People stand without thinking. Chairs scrape. Files drop. The officer stays frozen. Officer, the bailiff says sharply, stand. The officer moves, stiff and slow. His face is pale. His mouth opens, then closes. The judge, because that's what he is now, steps forward. His thoughts race, but his face stays calm. Years of practice hold it steady. He feels the eyes on him. The weight of the room. The shift. He stops a few feet from the officer. Step aside, Judge Hale says. The officer doesn't move. I didn't know, the officer says quickly. No one told me. Judge Hale studies him. Close. Careful. You didn't ask, he says. The officer swallows. I was just doing my job. Judge Hale nods once. Your job, he repeats. The sergeant clears his throat. Your Honor, he says. This was a misunderstanding. Judge Hale looks at him. Was it? He asks. The sergeant hesitates. Judge Hale turns back to the officer. Do you know how many times I've walked into a building like this? He asks. The officer says nothing. How many times I've been stopped? The judge continues, question delayed. The officer's eyes flicker. Today, the judge says, you decided I didn't belong. I didn't know who you were, the officer says. Judge Hale's voice stays even. That's the point. Silence spreads. The journalist's phone stays raised now. No one tells her to put it down. The bailiff steps aside, clearing the path. Court is ready, he says. Judge Hale turns toward the courtroom doors. Then stops. He turns back to the officer. Before I enter, he says, we're going to address what just happened. The officer stiffens. Here, he asks. Yes, Judge Hale says. Here. People lean in. No one leaves. You grabbed my arm, the judge says. Do you deny that? The officer shakes his head. No, Your Honor. You blocked my access to this courtroom, the judge continues. Do you deny that? No. You raised your voice, the judge says. You threatened removal. The officer's shoulders sag. Yes. Judge Hale nods. Did I raise my voice at you? No. Did I threaten you? No. Did I disobey a lawful instruction? The officer hesitates. The sergeant shifts. Answer, Judge Hale says. No, the officer admits. Judge Hale lets the silence stretch. Not long. Just enough. Then explain, he says. Why this escalated? The officer's mouth opens. Nothing comes out. The judge turns to the hallway. Did anyone witness this interaction? A pause. Then a hand rises. The middle-aged woman with the folder. I did, she says. Another hand. The young clerk. I saw it. The bystander from earlier lifts his hand too. So did I. Judge Hale nods. We will hear from you, he says. After court convenes. The officer looks around. Cornered. Your Honor, he says, voice cracking now. I'm sorry. The apology hangs there. Then, Judge Hale studies him. I believe you're sorry, he says. Now. The officer flinches. Accountability, the judge continues, does not begin with regret. It begins with truth. He turns to the sergeant. Escort this officer out of my courtroom. The sergeant blinks. Your Honor. Out, Judge Hale repeats. Now. The sergeant nods and places a hand lightly on the officer's arm. Let's go, he says. The officer resists for half a second, then moves. As he's led away, his eyes lock on the judge. They are no longer narrowed. They are afraid. Judge Hale watches him go. Feels the tremor in his own hands. He hides it by folding them together. The bailiff clears his throat. All parties, he says, please enter. Judge Hale steps into the courtroom. The room rises again. Respect this time. Real. He takes his seat behind the bench. The weight of it settles in his spine. He looks out at the room. The clerk looks relieved. The journalist focused. The witness is alert. He lifts the gavel. Be seated, he says. The sound echoes. Court has begun. But something else has too. He looks down at the docket. Then up again. Before we proceed, Judge Hale says, the court notes a serious incident in the hallway. Every eye sharpens. This court will address it, he says, fully. The officer's empty spot near the door feels loud. Judge Hale takes a breath. Call the first witness. And the truth steps forward. The courtroom feels different now. Not calmer. Sharper. Judge Hale sits still behind the bench. His hands rest flat. He keeps his breathing slow. Controlled. The way he learned to do long ago. Call the first witness, he says. The clerk swallows. The court calls Ms. Ellen Wright. The middle-aged woman from the hallway stands. Her folder shakes slightly in her hands as she walks forward. She takes the oath. Her voice wavers on the last word. Ms. Wright, Judge Hale says gently. Where were you this morning at approximately 8:30? In the hallway, she says. Outside courtroom B. And what did you observe? She looks at the defense table. Then at the empty space where the officer should be. I saw the officer stop you, she says. Over and over. The courtroom stays quiet. What stood out to you? The judge asks. He didn't listen, she says. Not once. He talked over you. He treated you like you were in the way. Judge Hale nods. Did you see the officer touch me? Yes, she says. He grabbed your arm. A murmur ripples through the room. Thank you, Judge Hale says. You may step down. She exhales like she's been holding her breath for minutes. Call the next witness, the judge says. The clerk's voice steadies. The court calls Mr. Daniel Lopez. The bystander steps forward, hands in his pockets. Nervous. Mr. Lopez, Judge Hale says, why did you speak up? Mr. Lopez hesitates. Because it didn't feel right, he says. You weren't doing anything wrong. What happened when you spoke up? The judge asks. The officer shut me down, Mr. Lopez says. Fast. Judge Hale nods. Did the officer's behavior change after people started watching? Mr. Lopez thinks. Yeah, he says. He got louder. More aggressive. Judge Hale lets that sit. Thank you, he says. You may step down. The journalist shifts in her seat, pen flying. The clerk calls the next name. Ms. Rachel Kim. The young clerk from the hallway approaches. Her face is pale, but her voice is clear. I was working the desk, she says. I heard the officer say the man didn't belong. The judge's jaw tightens slightly. Did you believe that? He asks. No, she says. I believed he didn't want to check. A few heads nod. Thank you, Judge Hale says. You may step down. He looks toward the door. Bring in the officer, he says. The room stiffens. The officer enters with the sergeant. His uniform looks smaller now. His steps slower. He stands before the bench. Officer, Judge Hale says, state your name for the record. The officer does. Officer, the judge continues, did you prevent me from entering my courtroom? Yes, the officer says quietly. Why? I thought he was disruptive, the officer says. I thought he was trying to cause a scene. Based on what? Judge Hale asks. The officer swallows. His tone, he says. His refusal to sit. Judge Hale leans forward slightly. Is refusing to sit a crime? He asks. No. Is it grounds for detention? No. Is it a threat? The officer hesitates. No. Judge Hale nods. Did you check my credentials? No, the officer admits. Why not? The officer's face tightens. I didn't think I needed to. The words echo. Judge Hale lets them. Officer, he says, do you treat every person in this building the same way? The officer shifts. Yes, he says. Too fast. Judge Hale looks at him. Do you? The officer's shoulders sag. No, he admits. Who do you treat differently? The judge asks. The officer opens his mouth. Closes it. The courtroom holds its breath. I treat people based on perceived risk, the officer says finally. Perceived by whom? Judge Hale asks. By me. Judge Hale nods once. And what made me a risk? The officer doesn't answer. Answer, Judge Hale says. The officer's voice cracks. I made assumptions, he says. Judge Hale sits back. Assumptions based on what? The officer looks down. Appearance, he says. The word lands heavy. Judge Hale feels it hit somewhere deep. Old. Familiar. Thank you, he says. That will be all. The officer looks up, startled. That's it, he asks. Judge Hale's eyes meet his. For now, he says. He turns to the courtroom. Let the record reflect, Judge Hale says, voice steady, that this incident occurred under the authority of this court. Pens move fast. This court finds reasonable cause to believe that the officer abused his authority. The officer stiffens. Accordingly, Judge Hale continues, this matter is referred for immediate internal review. The sergeant's jaw tightens. Judge Hale lifts the gavel slightly. Not yet striking. This court also orders, he says, that all hallway security footage from this morning be preserved. The journalist looks up sharply. The officer's face drains again. Judge Hale pauses. There is more, he says. The courtroom leans in. He feels the weight now. The cost of speaking. The cost of silence. This court will recess for 10 minutes, Judge Hale says. The gavel strikes. Recess. People erupt into whispers. The officer stands frozen. Judge Hale rises. As he steps away from the bench, he feels the tremor again. Stronger this time. He steadies himself on the edge of the desk. Because what comes next won't just affect one officer. It will expose a pattern, and patterns never fall quietly. The courtroom doesn't empty during recess. It hums. Whispers move like wind through tall grass. Soft. Fast. Everywhere. Judge Hale stands in his chambers, hands braced against the desk. He keeps his head down. Keeps his breathing slow. Patterns, he thinks. They always show themselves if you look long enough. A knock. Your Honor, the clerk asks from the doorway. Yes, he says. She steps in, holding a tablet and a thin stack of papers. Internal Affairs responded, she says. Faster than usual. That doesn't surprise him. Anything else, he asks. She hesitates. There are prior complaints, she says. Against the same officer. Judge Hale closes his eyes for half a second. How many, he asks. 3 formal, she says. 2 informal. All dismissed. Dismissed. He opens his eyes. On what grounds? Insufficient evidence, she says. Lack of corroboration. He nods. Bring them in, he says. The clerk leaves. Judge Hale straightens his robe and returns to the bench. The room snaps to attention. All rise. They sit again. Judge Hale looks at the officer. He looks smaller now. Folded inward. Officer, Judge Hale says, are you aware of prior complaints filed against you? The officer stiffens. Yes, he says. How many? The judge asks. I don't remember. Judge Hale nods. That's understandable, he says. I do. The officer looks up. 3 formal complaints, Judge Hale continues. 2 informal reports. The officer's mouth opens slightly. All involving men who looked like me, the judge says. All involving delays, unnecessary stops, or physical contact. The room tightens. Each complaint was dismissed, Judge Hale says. Do you know why? The officer swallows. No. Because no one spoke up, the judge says. Because no one was watching. The journalist's pen pauses. Judge Hale turns to the witnesses. Ms. Wright, he says. Did you file a complaint today? She nods. Yes, she says. I already did. The judge nods. Mr. Lopez? Yes, he says. Ms. Kim? She hesitates. Then nods. Yes. Judge Hale looks back at the officer. That's 3, he says. In one morning. The officer's shoulders sag. Do you see the pattern? Judge Hale asks. The officer doesn't answer. I'll help you, the judge says. Authority without accountability repeats itself. He turns to the sergeant. Sergeant, Judge Hale says, were you aware of these prior complaints? The sergeant stiffens. Yes, he admits. But they were closed. Closed doesn't mean resolved, Judge Hale says. The sergeant nods slowly. No, sir. Judge Hale looks out at the room. This court is not here to punish emotion, he says. It is here to examine behavior. He leans forward slightly. When behavior repeats, he says, it stops being a mistake. The officer's eyes glisten. I didn't mean to, he begins. Judge Hale lifts a hand. Intent is not the issue, he says. Impact is. The room stays silent. Judge Hale gestures to the clerk. Enter the prior complaints into the record, he says. The clerk types quickly. The journalist's phone vibrates. She ignores it. Judge Hale feels the weight again. Heavy. Necessary. This court finds a consistent pattern of biased enforcement, he says. And a failure of supervision. The sergeant's jaw tightens. Judge Hale meets his eyes. This court orders an independent review, he says. Effective immediately. A ripple moves through the room. Additionally, Judge Hale continues, the officer is placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. The officer's knees bend slightly. He steadies himself on the table. No, he whispers. Judge Hale watches him carefully. This is not personal, he says. It is procedural. The officer looks up, desperate. I have a family, he says. Judge Hale's voice softens. Just a fraction. So did the men you stopped, he says. So do I. The words hang there. Judge Hale glances at the clock. There is one more matter, he says. The room leans in again. The court has received notification, he says. That footage from this morning exists. The officer's breath catches. Body camera? The judge asks. Yes, the sergeant says. And hallway security. Judge Hale nods. This court orders that footage be released to Internal Affairs and preserved for public record. The journalist's head snaps up. Public. The officer closes his eyes. Judge Hale lifts the gavel. This court will recess until the footage is reviewed, he says. The gavel strikes. The sound is final. As people rise, Judge Hale remains seated for a moment. He feels the ache now. In his wrist. In his chest. In places memory lives. Patterns are heavy, he thinks. But breaking them is heavier. He stands. The officer is escorted out again. Slower this time. Head down. Judge Hale watches him go. This isn't the end. It's the moment before consequences become real. The courtroom fills again in the afternoon. Not with the same quiet fear. With expectation. Judge Hale sits behind the bench, his robe heavy on his shoulders. He feels the ache in his wrist when he shifts. It hasn't faded. He lets it stay. A reminder. The officer stands at the side of the room now. No vest. No belt. Just a uniform that looks thinner without power inside it. The sergeant sits behind him. Straight-backed. Silent. Judge Hale lifts his eyes. This court is back in session, he says. The gavel strikes. The sound carries. Before this court proceeds, Judge Hale continues, we will address the findings from Internal Affairs. A representative steps forward. Neutral face. Clipboard tight in her hands. Your Honor, she says, we have reviewed the footage from this morning. The officer stares at the floor. The footage confirms, she continues, that the officer blocked access, escalated verbally, and initiated physical contact without cause. A low murmur ripples through the room. Additionally, she says, prior complaints show similar behavior patterns. Judge Hale nods once. Thank you, he says. The representative steps back. Judge Hale turns to the officer. Officer, he says, you were entrusted with authority. The officer looks up slowly. Authority is not permission, the judge continues. It is responsibility. The officer's eyes are wet now. He doesn't wipe them. This court finds, Judge Hale says, voice steady, That you abused that responsibility. The officer swallows. As of this moment, Judge Hale continues, you are relieved of duty pending termination proceedings. The words fall clean. Sharp. Final. The officer's shoulders collapse inward. I didn't think, he begins. Judge Hale lifts a hand. That sentence, he says, has caused enough harm. Silence. Judge Hale looks out at the room. At the witnesses. At the journalist. At people who chose today not to look away. This court also orders, he says, mandatory review of courthouse security procedures. The sergeant stiffens. Training, Judge Hale continues, focused on bias, accountability, and public conduct. The sergeant nods. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Hale leans back slightly. Finally, he says, this court recognizes the emotional harm caused today. He pauses. To every person who watched and said nothing, he says, this court reminds you, silence is not neutral. The room absorbs that. Judge Hale looks down at the docket. The original hearing will proceed, he says. But first, he stops. His voice softens. Ms. Wright, he says, Mr. Lopez, Ms. Kim. They look up. Thank you, he says. The words are simple. Heavy. They nod. One wipes her eyes. Judge Hale lifts the gavel again. This court is adjourned for 10 minutes, he says. The gavel strikes. People stand slowly this time. Thoughtfully. The officer is escorted out one last time. No resistance. No words. Judge Hale watches him go. He feels no victory. Just wait. When the room empties, Judge Hale stays seated. The clerk approaches quietly. Your Honor, she says, are you all right? He nods. In time, he says. She hesitates. I've never seen that happen, she says. He looks at her. That's the problem, he says gently. Later, outside, sunlight spills across the courthouse steps. Judge Hale stands alone for a moment. He removes his robe and folds it carefully, the way his mother taught him to fold clothes. With respect, the journalist approaches. Judge Hale, she says, may I ask you something? He nods. Did you know how today would end? She asks. He thinks. No, he says. I knew how it could. She nods slowly. Do you think things will change? She asks. He looks back at the building. At the doors. At the guard standing straighter now. Change doesn't happen all at once, he says. It happens when people stop pretending not to see. She thanks him and steps away. Judge Hale descends the steps. A man passes him and nods. Respectful. Quiet. A woman meets his eyes and smiles. Small. Real. Judge Hale breathes in. The city moves around him. Unaware. Aware. Both. He thinks of the word that started it all. Unimportant. He knows better. He has always known. But today the record does too. He walks into the crowd. Not louder. Not bigger. Just seen. And for the first time that day. That is enough.